Hi there, I'm Mark Dance, and this is my N-scale Columbian Western Model Railroad. In front of us we have the main classification yards of the Columbian Western. This is Nelson, BC, or my rendition of Nelson, BC. On my prototype, which is the Canadian Pacific across southern British Columbia circa 1970, Nelson was a division point yard separating the subdivision which ran to the east all the way to Cranbrook, which was the Nelson subdivision, and the boundary subdivision which ran to the west. And it's the boundary subdivision which was my primary focus. As a division point yard, the shops at Nelson were responsible for the running maintenance of the locomotives. Although there were locomotives of all different designs serviced at Nelson, the primary ones of interest were the FM units that were built out of the Canadian Locomotive Company in London, Ontario, so the C-liners and the H-liners, H1644s. This building specifically, this model, was on the cover of Model Railroad Planning 2020, and I had a question on the YouTube channel about how the job aids that we described in that article are used. So the focus of this YouTube video is to describe those job aids, including the timer tags, and to review how they're used. First, a bit of background. What caused me to review how we hosted locomotives on the layout were conversations I'd had with Mr. Mike Baroni, who'd worked in the shops in the early 1970s, which is my model time period. My model of the shops took about a year to construct, and I had numerous conversations with Mike during that period. Mike was a wealth of knowledge not only on the physical plant, but also how the shops were run, and I wanted to reflect some of Mike's knowledge back into how we conducted hostling on the Columbian Western. Let's take a quick look at the Nelson Yard track plan and understand the service facility's orientation inside the yard. Nelson is located on the south side of Kootenay Lake, and in our model rendition, the aisleway represents the lake, so the operators stand in the lake looking at the yard on the shoreline. The south side of the yard is against the backdrop, the north side is against the aisleway. The west stretches out to our right, which is the boundary subdivision, and the east to the left, which is actually the Nelson subdivision going to Cranbrook, which is hidden staging on the Columbian Western. The main shop building is centrally located in the yard and surrounded by the shop trackage, which includes the servicing tracks and the Y. The shop trackage is sandwiched between the main and arrival departure yard to the south and the classification yard to the north. There is a significant amount of shop trackage on the west end and the east end of the shop building. As we will see, it's here where a lot of the servicing occurs. It's also where the service locomotive consists are left ready for their trains. One very significant track is the shop track, which is the track just south of the shop building. It's on this track that inbound consists are handed off between the road crews and the hostlers. Inbound crews left their locomotives on this track to the west end of the shop building where the star is in this diagram. It was a short walk from here to the sign-out desk. Associated with the shop building, and of the same basic architecture, was the steam plant just across Cottonwood Creek, which is where it got its water. The steam plant provided both steam and compressed air for all the yard operations. On the east side of the diesel shop are the fuel and water stands. These stands are arranged so they can serve consists on both approach tracks as well as the shop track. On the northeastern corner of the shops is the stores area. This has a spur track which delivers boxcars of supplies, as well as delivering tank cars of lubrication oil and removing tank cars of waste lubrication oil. Further to the east is the sanding area. A sanding tower delivers dried sand to platforms on both sides of the track here. On the prototype, sand was delivered by a dump truck and dried in a sand house before being blown up into the sand tower. But on the model, we use this as an opportunity to deliver covered hoppers of dried sand to a pneumatic unloading facility. The final area of interest when it comes to engine servicing is the fuel oil delivery area, far to the west end of the yard near the cleanout tracks. It was here that fuel was delivered in steam days, and this area was repurposed for delivery of diesel fuel. In addition to a massive landmark of the yard, a 250,000 gallon storage tank, this area also features an elevated bunker C tank, as well as standpipes and pump houses for extracting diesel from spotted tank cars. So that's a quick overview of the diesel servicing operations. Now let's turn our attention to how we simulate servicing on the Columbian Western, and specifically the two job aids that we give to the hostlers to help them do their jobs. The first tool is a description of what the hostler needs to achieve, both generally and specifically during an operating session. This description is posted on the light balance above the servicing area. The left side of the job aid includes a description on the steps that the hostler should go through to service each inbound locomotive. The document describes the order in which the servicing steps should be performed, as well as how long each locomotive consist should remain at the servicing location to simulate the servicing. Finally, the document describes where each serviced consist should be left and which direction it should be facing as a function of which direction its next assignment is in, with eastbounds and westbounds treated differently. In the bottom left-hand corner of the job aid is a schematic of the shop trackage, identifying all the servicing points described in the process above. Let's use this diagram to show the flow of locomotives as they move through the servicing process. As has been mentioned, the road crews drop all the inbound power on the shop track near the southwest corner of the diesel shop. From that point, the hostler takes over. The first stop for all power are the fuel and watering stands on the platform in the east end of the diesel shop. There, the power will sit for a minimum of 30 minutes being serviced. After that 30 minutes is up, the second stop is the sanding tower where traction sand is added and the sanders are tested. This takes another 30 minutes. Now on the C&W, in order to save time, we've adopted a significant simplification. The hostlers do not need to index each locomotive in a consist through the stations. So for example, as long as one unit in a consist is underneath the sanding tower, all the units are considered to be under the sanding tower. Said another way, the 30 minutes dwell time at the sanding station is for all the consists, regardless of how many units are in it, whether it's 1 unit or 4 units. Now we could have gone a different way and had the hostler individually index each unit through the sanding station, but that would have required more room as well as more time, and likely we would have needed a full-time hostler position. After the 30-minute sanding step, it's into the diesel shop for maintenance, running, inspection, and replacement of supplies. That takes a minimum of 60 minutes. The fourth and final step in the servicing process is outbound load testing. This is where a load is placed across the generators of all the locomotives in a consist, and the MU's locomotives are brought up to speed to make sure that they all come up to speed in the same time. Now this generates a lot of smoke, so it has to be done outside. However, the location outside is a function of which direction the locomotives will be running in the next assignment. If the next assignment for the consist will be on a westbound, then the load testing will be done on the tracks just outside the west side of the diesel shop. This way, when the load testing is finished, the consist can be left there waiting for the outbound crew. The same is true if it's on an eastbound train, then the load testing will be done on the tracks of the east end of the shop. In the simulation that we're showing on the schematic, the locomotive consist is facing east. Let's imagine that its next assignment is a westbound job. The locomotive set will have to leave the diesel shop, heading east, turn on the Y, and make its way over to the garden tracks of the west end of the diesel shop for load testing. And once that final 30 minutes of load testing is complete, the units are considered serviced and are released to the road crew for the next assignment. So that's the static part of the hostler instructions, the portion that doesn't change between operating sessions. Now let's look at the right-hand side where information for each operating session is populated. This table lists all the power that the hostler will need to prepare during the operating session. I populated it before the operating session at the same time I'm creating the arrival departure information for the yardmaster. Note that the table only deals with inbound power. Why is that? That's because I make the simplification that the power that's present in the shop at the beginning of the operating session has already been serviced and is ready to go. This way, crews can hit the ground running and we can get the operating session started quickly. Because we make that assumption that all power in the shop at the beginning of the session is serviced and ready to go, we only need to tell the hostler what to do with new power that arrives during the session. The left column in the table lists the lead unit number of the consist roughly in the chronological order they're expected to arrive. The middle column gives the next assignment for that power. This is important because it indicates the direction the power needs to be facing and where it should be left ready for its road crew. And the final column has the fast clock time by when the hostler has to have that power ready. Let's look at a specific example. The table tells the hostler that the third train in is going to have power led by unit 4236. It's probably going to be the train from Trail, the hotshot east, which changes power in Nelson before heading to Cranbrook. The hostler does not need to know that. What they need to know is that it needs to be ready for 6 p.m. that evening so they can make the 7:30 departure time, and that the hotshot west train that it's going to be on is a westbound so they can make sure the units are pointed in the right direction and are ready in the right location for the crews to pick up. So the hostler information sheet provides the information necessary to service each specific consist. We still need some way to mark the time when each servicing step is done. Commonly, timers of some form are used for this. The first thing we tried was just to expand the table on the hostler information sheet, so that the hostler could use a pencil to record the fast time when each servicing step started and stopped. But with 4 or more consists being serviced at once, that was a lot of information to keep track of, and it took a lot of time. I then considered using kitchen timers like others have done. Mechanical, electric, or sand timers might work. However, with multiple consists potentially going through the same servicing step at a variety of different locations, somehow referencing a specific timer to a specific locomotive seemed very daunting. Added to this, the aisle directly in front of the diesel shop was the narrowest in the layout at 30 inches, so there was no room for a shelf for timers to sit on. So on reflection, what I was looking for in a timer mechanism was one that minimized record keeping and was simple and visually intuitive to use. I thought about placing miniature timers right beside the locomotive or consist on the layout. Then it would be clear when the timer was up and that locomotive or consist could be moved to its next step. However, the need to reset those timers and the mechanisms to drive them would make those timers bulky. It occurred to me that we don't need to measure the time precisely. As long as a certain minimum amount of time has passed, then we can determine the servicing has been complete. The fast clock is right over the yard telling us what the absolute time is. So as long as we have a flag associated with that locomotive or consist that indicates when the minimum amount of time has passed, then that should be adequate. Static tags with a resolution of 15 minutes could be placed directly beside the locomotives or even on the locomotive consist to indicate when on the fast clock it would be alright to move that locomotive from that servicing step. For example, let's say that the fast clock reads 6:05 in the morning and we have a locomotive that we're moving to the sanding tower, where we know it needs to stay for at least 30 minutes. The hostler can select a 45 timer tag and place it beside the locomotive. That means that loco should stay there and not be moved until at least 45 minutes after the hour. And of course, the world's not going to end should the hostler pick a 30 timer tag instead of a 45 tag and move the locomotive from the sanding tower at 30 past the hour rather than waiting till 45 minutes past the hour. For me, that's close enough. That's an example of a good enough accuracy without expensive precision. Here's what the timer tags look like. They're small pieces of evergreen starring angle painted in 4 different colors. One for 15 minutes after the hour, one for 30, one for 45, and one for on the hour. I secure them with double-sided tape on the inside of a small container which is within easy reach of the hostler. The hostler can then use tweezers to select the tag they want and place them beside the locomotive or on top of the shop building. When the power is inside the shop building for its maintenance, the tag can be placed on top of the shop building roughly over top of where the consist is. This is adequate but not ideal because sometimes it's difficult to remember what the number is on the consist. Let's watch a quick demo of a Colombian Western hostler as they use the timer tags to help simulate servicing at the Nelson diesel shop. The road crew of the morning hotshot from Trail, mixture 4236 East, is bringing their power up the shop track. They'll leave their power by the southwest corner of the shop, gather their extra flags, and make their way to the sign-out desk where they'll mark off. With the hostler now in charge of the power, the first stop are the fuel and watering stands at the east end of the shop, so off we go east. Fuel and watering stands are arranged to simultaneously serve locomotives parked on either one of their 3 tracks, and in a pinch they can also serve locomotives that are parked on the shop track just to the south. With the consist parked at the fueling stands, we check the fast clock over the yard. 6:16 in the morning. We know we need to leave the consist for at least 30 minutes, so we select the timer tag, which is for 45 minutes after the hour. We know that that's the earliest that we can move that consist. We'll place the tag right on top of the radiator to the lead unit where it's nice and visible. While we're here, let's check on the status of 8549, which is also at the fuel and watering stands. This timer tag reads 15. Well, that time has come and gone, so it's time for it to move to the next station, which is the sanding station. With the Loco spotted at the sanding tower, let's check the fast clock. 6:50. 30 minutes to the sanding tower means it can't be moved until 7:20. So let's pick a 30 timer tag and mark it with that to indicate that we can't move that Loco until at least 30 minutes after the hour. Let's check on what's happening on the west end of the shops. H cylinder 8727 on track 3 is unmarked. That means it's finished its servicing and is ready for its next assignment. 8717's consist in the shop will be finished its maintenance and inspection at 15 minutes after the hour. And the 8608's consist has finished load testing at the top of the hour. We check the fast clock and see that it's 7:22, which means both those consists have finished their servicing step. The load testing was the final servicing step for 8608, so it can be released for its next job. And the 8717 can be moved to do its load testing now. 8717 and its partner's next assignment is train number 87, which is a westbound. We advance the consist onto the west end service tracks for load testing. If the next assignment had been an eastbound, we'd go the opposite direction through the shop, and the load testing would be done on the east end tracks. Load testing takes 30 minutes. The fast clock is reading 7:27. We select a 00 timer tag to indicate that by the top of the hour, 8717 and its partner will be finished load testing, and as that's the final step in servicing, they'll be ready for the next assignment. So that's how we go about simulating in a very simplified way engine servicing during an operating session on the Columbia and Western. It's about a half of a full-time role, so it's normally combined with the east yard position, or it's something I do as home road crew in between moving trains in and out from staging. If we were to dedicate a full-time role to the position, you could easily expand in a few different ways. The most logical first step would be to make the dwell time of a consist of locomotives at each servicing station a function of how many locomotives are actually in the consist. So for example, this consist here with 4 locomotives would take 4 times as long to sand as a single locomotive. That just makes logical sense. However, it would mean that the hostler would need to move that consist 1 locomotive at a time, indexing it through the sanding station, and that requires more time for someone to do, obviously. Other things you could do, and many other people do this, is for each consist you could roll a die, and depending on the results of that die, you can pull an event card. And that event card might say that you need to pull one of the locomotives out of the consist and send it to the heavy servicing bay for a predetermined amount of time for servicing. Other things you could do are actually to build up the consist and deconsist to increase or decrease the amount of horsepower depending upon the train that the consist is going to be assigned to. So you can see you can expand it in a few different ways. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. Should you have any more questions or any questions at all about this process, just leave a comment into the YouTube channel. I'll do my best to get back to it right away. Thank you very much for watching.